So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those of you on the line. We are expecting quite a few more people, and hopefully they
Can get through security
and not change their mind because of the holiday backlog. This is one of the most interesting, complex, and consequential issues in socioeconomic development for Arab society. And we're very, very lucky to have two experts on, not only experts on advancing processes, but on making them digestible and accessible and understandable to those of us who care to learn more. I'll start at the beginning. I'm Liron Shoham. I'm Executive Director of the Interagency Task Force on Israeli Arab Issues, an educational organization for the North American Jewish community. We're so pleased to be partnering with the Jewish Funders Network on bringing this aspect of Jewish-Arab relations to our audiences. Many of us have been tracking efforts to close economic gaps for Arab society in Israel through investments like Government Resolution 922 over the last 5 years, and may have heard about increases in Arab citizen matriculation in higher education and in integration into the workforce, especially women. But another aspect of these investments was to try to improve the condition of Arab communities in Israel. All Arab towns and villages in Israel are ranked on the lowest 4 ratings of Israel's socioeconomic scale. That's a scale of 1 to 10. That means they're the most disadvantaged. And part of the investments to close gaps was try to improve their condition. And on this level, there's been far less advancement than on any of the issues that have tried to open doors to Arab individuals into the mainstreams of Israel's economy. This means that whether it's efforts to create more housing, more commercial zones, more infrastructure of economic opportunity, a lot of the intentions have faced challenges in implementation. What it can be boiled down to is challenges in urban planning. These 2 simple words contain in them some of the most sensitive and intractable gaps between state processes for developing communities and the realities that have advanced in Arab communities. And we're very fortunate to have Emily Silverman, professor of urban planning at Hebrew University, and Anaya Bana, a professional urban planner who until recently was the lead district planner in the Wadi Ara region and has now gone back to the Arab Center for Alternative Planning to take her expertise nationwide. With that, I welcome you.
Thank you.
So you want me to introduce Anaya, and we don't do a who's in the room?
You can.
We can.
That would be great.
A quick one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to
Start
start.
around Phyllis Bernstein, Greater Metro West.
Josh Arno, co-chair Social Venture Fund for Jewish Arab Equality and Shared Society.
Liron Shoham.
Tamar Freiberg from Jewish Funders Network.
David Fishman, President of Emeritus Gimbridge Family Foundation.
Abby Mosher.
Alan Dibak, the Tower Foundation, and co-chair with Josh of the Venture Fund.
Stephen Wills, I'm a board member of the Jewish Community Relations Council.
Jonathan Russo, I'm a private donor and early funder of Emily's urban clinic projects.
Michelle Herrera, the task force, and Hillary just walked out. She was in the back.
Maura Millis, I'm from American Friends at the Hebrew University.
So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce you guys to Anaya Bana. I thought about how many ways and contacts I have worked with Anaya over the last year. We sat last night trying to think, when did we meet? And we couldn't even figure that out. But I think the most significant moment, and I'll say 5, was in the most significant moments, I will say 5. The first was in 2011, when Israel was in the heights of the social protest. And I was running this team of academics who were writing a report to advise the social protest leaders on housing and transport and lands and planning, and there was nobody Arab on that entire team. We had 50 to 70 academics, you can imagine chairing those kinds of meetings, and there was nobody Arab on the team. And I reached out and said, Anaya, will you be part of this? And not only did Anaya say yes, but she took on a commitment of reviewing every document that we put out, correcting and focusing us to make sure that we were at least a little bit addressing the issues, and then set up sessions in Nazareth and Rahat to present those materials. So that's one side of Anaya. She's incredibly committed, focused, and details. That's one. Two, on this page, when I moved to Hebrew University, which was in about 2013, I think, to take on a job in their urban planning program, there was nobody teaching urban planning in Arab towns. Well, that seemed like a major deficit, especially as you'll hear today with 922, the importance of planning in and the budgets that are going to planning in Arab towns. It seemed absolutely important that a new generation of planners know how to do that. We got a generous grant from the Savran Family Foundation and hired Anaya to come and teach, which he's been doing now for the last 3 years, and that means that the mostly Israeli Jewish students who take your course have some kind of knowledge. The next step, 3 of 5, we had very few Arab students in our urban planning program. Of 160 students, we had maybe 1 Arab student. Again, I'm going back 5 or 6 years. Jonathan Rousseau was the first person to give a scholarship for that. And then Anaya said, I'll come and be part of the interviewing committee. And as part of the interviewing committee, year after year after year, she's not only grown to know who are these students, but she's a mentor for them. And she's a role model for them. And for these young women students studying urban planning, to see what it's possible to do and how confidently it's possible to express your opinions and how much you can accomplish, I think has been a huge, huge benefit. 4th of 5, in the last 2 years, we've been working together on the parallel move to 922 in some ways, not exactly parallel, in East Jerusalem, on bringing together professionals from East and West Jerusalem to think about how to use planning and land regulation tools to improve housing, transport, employment. A little less of our work has been on education, public spaces. And there too, having Anaya take on a leading role with that of showing, this one is interesting, here's what we're doing in Wadi Ara, and here's what it could mean for you in East Jerusalem. All too often we're fragmented. We learn or we get a case study here, we do something well here, we don't take it elsewhere. You've been really able to show how do we translate knowledge from one place to another. And finally, this last year, we started working together on public space and placemaking issues. We were just at the European Placemaking Week in Valencia. We brought a team from Jerusalem. And I'm really hoping that we can continue to work on that and other things as we move forward. So Anaya is a senior research fellow at the Urban Clinic, but she is much, much more, as you will now hear.
Thank you. Want to start? Okay, I'm a landscape architect, urban planner. I worked for the first 10, 12 years in the Arab Center for Alternative Planning in ACAP. I started from landscape architect, and it was very interesting for me. The most interesting is looking in the macro scale, how we get these decisions and how we really plan our towns, how we allocate. All of the planning issues is the most interesting and most conflictual issue, especially in Israel. So from that, I continued in my job for the last 4 years as the chief planner of Wadi Ara region. Wadi Ara is Wadi Ara region is the planning committee. It's a local committee planning, In the hierarchical planning system inside of Israel, we have the local, we have the district, and we have the national. So it's statutorical or by the law inside of the system, of the planning system. I was the chief planner there, and it was responsible for housing and planning inside all of 14 townships, which contains about 200,000 population. It's about 16% of the Arabs inside of Israel with the most complicated planning situation. After that, I'm coming back to ACAP, but let me just start with overview about the planning situation in Israel, how it's during a timeline, how we can see it, and what's the changes in the policy of planning policies, and how it is implemented for the last 10 years, let's say. I will start from 2011. You mentioned the protest, and I think it's the first time that we have the housing issues more focused in Israel.
Does everybody remember the 2011?
Yeah,
So
sure
they were
do.
sparked by a national shortage in affordable housing. So there's a deeper issue in Arab society in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. And as Emily mentioned, I was part of the team, of the professional team that accompanied all the protests. But actually, what was done by all of these, it was a period between 2011 and 2014 when we have a new government in Israel. There was establishment of housing cabinet, and it's really the first time that the housing issues was really focused in Israel. Was more focused, had its focus in a governmental cabinet. But actually what happened in the cabinet, it's discussing, suggesting solutions for more average income Jewish families. So we are not talking about poor, and definitely not Arabs. We were ignored by the government, by all the decisions or even the discussions inside of these governmental cabinet. The most famous answer that we get when we talked about the crisis of housing and planning in the Arab townships, that the Arabs own the land. They own the land. 90% or more than 90% of the land inside of the jurisdiction area of the Arab towns are privately owned by the Arabs. So they don't have problem. They got their land, they can solve their problem. But actually, when we get there in the cabinet there was discussions. Of course, it was in the Knesset. In that time, there was Hanna Swed. I think many of you met him. We worked together in ACAP, in the Arab Center for Alternative Planning before. And as the member of the Knesset, he said, what about the Arabs? We are not represented, nor our issues, nor solutions. It's not connected to us when we have a very big crisis. And actually, I got there. I presented the data, the situation, the crisis inside of the governmental cabinet, the housing cabinet, the governmental housing cabinet, and told them there is the big problem, the crisis, what's happening, and this is one of the things that I will explain a little in my review and my presentation here. And the result of that presentation was establishment. When I say that, it's not me saying that, it's also the people that were participating in the cabinet, like the head of the planning administration. We knew that the presentation or presenting the data regarding crisis in the housing and in the planning in the Arab townships, it made the people look like, oh, there is something that we have to investigate. That's why there was a governmental team established in 2015, and this team was supposed to work about 120 days, but of course he worked more. But he published a report with a recommendation. And in 2015, you can see what's in the presentation. It's the cover of this report. And for me, it was a report that was printed. It was guidance for me that I put all the time beside me when I worked. And actually, after that, in the 1st of January 2016, I became the chief planner of Wadi Ara region, and I used that. I knew what was written. I presented in the cabinet, in the governmental cabinet. I participated as an expert in the discussions with this team, I knew the members of this team. I participated in writing and in the recommendations itself, and now I have a written guidance that I wanted to use in my job in the local planning committee. So it was something that accompanied me in 2015 till 2020. It's the implementation. Or actually I missed something. One of the main things that 120 teams talked about, he talked about many things, but he talked about funding and financial support. That's why there was a government resolution, which is called 92. I think many of you are familiar with this decision, and which it was a very important decision regarding funding and regarding helping the local municipalities and helping the Arabs in order to initiate plans and to close the gap in the planning issues in the Arab towns. After that, there was the entrance of my job. I used that, and this is what I want just to tell you in the micro, in the local level, what I used, and maybe how we can use it, or what happened. Let's say what happened in the macro level, in the national, what about 922, how it was implemented, and what we can get from there. So,
Because that's kind of small, you all have a printout of the presentation in front of you.
I want to describe the problem, and I'm impatient with maps. So I will use the map. If it's not clear, so just tell me. This is Kufr Qara, one of the areas that I worked. It was in Wadi Ara, but actually what I'm showing you here, it's familiar, and it's something familiar with other Arab townships, not only in Wadi Ara region, but in all of the regions. You can see here two colors. It's the yellow and the white points. The yellow, it's the development area. It's area where people can get permits in order to build. And it was approved, you can see or not in the presentation, it was approved in 1983, when I was 3 years old. And from 1983 till now, we don't have a new approved master plan or a plan. It's a master or detailed. I won't get to the details, but it's master or any plan that can give the opportunity to the local community to get permits for their houses. And if we say 1983, it's more than 30 years. The urban growth or the growth is continuing. We are talking about private ownership land. It's all what's outside the yellow area. It's defined as agriculture area. So you cannot get permits, but the people keep growing. We don't have state land, we don't have marketing or housing units given by the government. So the situation or what happened in almost all the Arab townships is what's called the illegal, we call it unpermitted or unplanned housing, which you can see all of the white points. These white points are more than 50% of the homes, they are homes, of the homes in Kufr Qara. And we are talking about more than 50% of the population, of the local population, Arab citizens, living illegally. So by the law, they are criminals. It's not only illegal, it's criminals. The law, in order to implement the law, we are talking about criminals, that the law says that we have to demolition of their houses. So I'm just presenting or describing the picture of what happens because of the lack of planning for many years, and it's the most contradiction, the most difficult situation that we have in the Arab townships when we get at the end to housing demolition or home demolition. So this is the situation in Wadi Ara.
Just a quick question. Is the only punishment for this criminal violation is demolition, or do they also put people in prison?
Taxes, fines.
Taxes, fines,
and to put them in prison. If they don't pay, they have to get to a period in the prison. They have to be there in the prison for a period, for a specific period, and it depends on the court decision. But this is the situation. But here I'm talking about numbers. And I'm giving you one more example. The example that I'm giving you now is the case study that I worked in last 4 years inside of the local committee. It's the same situation, but it's in Al Fahem. It's called, there we called it Kufr Qaryah, now it's in Al Fahem. It's the same situation with the most of the Arab townships. The black points, you can see, the black points, it's illegal, unpermitted. Unpermitted housing, unplanned housing. There was a plan, all of the blue area, it's here, the blue area, inside of this blue area. It's all area that is identified by plan approved in 1963 as agricultural area. And from 1963 till now, there was no new plan for any approval of development area or to give the opportunity for people to get housing permits. So this is the situation in Al Fahem, in one of the plants that I worked in. It contains about 24% of the local citizens. So we have the quarter of the local population are illegal and are criminals by the law and don't have any way to get housing permits or any initial services, and this is what I want to talk about. One of the things that I want to mention that I'm going back just to Qaryah. As you can see, we have.
What about the art gallery? Is it part of that?
About what?
Illegal land, the art gallery in Al Fahem.
We're in a rental property. On a rental property that's
no,
legal.
it has
It is legal. Thank you. Just curious. Just had to get through a couple of times.
I'm
It's legal. It's not an interior area. But what I wanted to say is that in this situation, we don't have economic development because we don't have allocation for any industrial, commercial, employment areas that could encourage or really be change the situation of economic development. That's why it's very connected. When we're talking about planning, it's not only housing, it's the whole situation. And we are talking about poor areas, poor municipalities. In the ratio that we have from 1 to 10, all of the Arab are in the low scale. It's still 4. Kufr Qaryah it's 4 from 10, and Al Fahem it's 2 from 10. So we are talking about very poor population and very poor municipalities.
What I've never understood, or I'm so glad you could explain this, is, and I've seen all of this development of personally, firsthand. Who hooks the buildings up to water and sewer?
Oh, great question.
It's like these are substantial buildings, and you just you have to get real water and real electricity, and you have to flush the toilet. There's a lot of people in these things. So who's hooking them up, and how doesn't the municipality say, explain how the infrastructure allows for all this illegal development?
And this is very excellent.
Because I don't understand.
This is my next slide. I want to talk, this is numbers. What I'm talking about, it's maps, it's 2D. Okay, we're looking from out here, and it's numbers. I'm talking about numbers, about quarter of citizens are illegal, are criminals. It's identifications by the law. But what happens? This is what happens. As I don't know if any of you were inside of Arab country. Yeah. So this is familiar. This is from Al Fahem. But if you get to any of the Arab towns, you can see what's happening, and it's very similar, except the areas that are planned before, and it's mainly on state land. If it's a state land, so there is initiation of planning before building, because we are not talking about planning and building, it's building and planning. This is what happens inside of the Arab towns. Okay, so this is what you see. It's the most difficult question regarding initial services. It's not only the waste, it's the electricity. We're talking about people living in their homes with pirate connections of electricity. It's not safe. You can even if you, because I worked in the local committee, I can see the unjust. Because someone have this connection to the electricity, to the company, to the governmental company, and he's the one that's giving electricity to all the people around him. So he can decide whether to give this, or he is not in good relation with her, so he can't give her. So it's socially, It's
Wow.
a very difficult situation. It's very difficult
So they're in
situation.
the utility business themselves.
Yeah.
Every homeowner
And it's awful.
distributes electricity themselves.
Yeah, it's not safe.
Unbelievable.
It's unjust. It's unjust inside unjust inside of what. This is what happens inside of this, and people cry from that. This is the most difficult situation that they have. It's not only illegal by definitions, by law. It's good. We have numbers. We can talk about numbers.
Are
But
people
the
making
limit-
money off reselling energy?
Yeah, of course.
And
He don't pay. He just allocate all the money and
But-
he pay.
Okay, electricity is a wire. How do you deal with, let's say, access to a sewage system?
Yeah,
before we
it's
leave
just-
electricity,
Okay, next, okay.
It's-
just one
it's
second.
all
What
pirate.
about solar energy?
Good question.
I mean, that's off the grid and you don't see much of it.
No, I try to promote something like that, solar energy or nature. The most difficult problem with that is that I have, if I want to put the solars, it must be on a permitted house. So if the house is on permission, he doesn't have a housing permission, you cannot use it, even his roof. This is the problem. So if you put the solars, it's another
It's another-
criminal act.
I see.
Wow. Yeah, this is what happened. So it's electricity, it's water, it's waste management, it's roads, it's safety, it's access. You can see here the piratic access to housing. It's homes. This is what happens. It's homes. You can see the lake. This is the electricity. You can see. And you get into more density areas, you can see a network of electricity connection, pirate electricity inside of the neighbors. You can see the roads, and of course, when 92 talked about public transportation, we don't have roads in order to have public transportation or to have buses inside of these areas. What else we can see from here?
Sidewalks?
So of course, there's no sidewalks. It's not safety, not for children, not for women. It's not accessible, not safe. And you can see here, it's only private initiatives. The private initiative, it's not taking into consideration any safety, any. Yeah, it's all not included in that. It's the desire of the one that have a little money, so he can invest in his own land. He can build and live till he have more money, because there is no there's no loans,
Mortgages.
no bank loans for these, because the banks do not give for unpermitted housing. So whenever he have saved enough, a little amount of money, he can come back and continue his building. So this is the situation that you can see for 10 years or for 5 years, and after that it could change by the private one situation, by the one situation, the owner
You
situation.
still haven't answered, who hooks this up to sewers? Who? You,
Yeah, usually
Water
it's
is
pirating.
water.
Yeah, usually it's pirating, sewage connection. But there is a ta'gid
Association.
association for sewage. That is there is the association that was there is a local association ta'gid Me'aron inside of and it gives services, and somehow in some of these here it's not, but in some of the neighborhoods they give this connection and they make the people pay for that. They take the money and do that, but it's pirate and it's inside in order to give initial service. Okay, and of course landscape. It's the last thing that I'm talking about, but you can see that even the development, even how they build, it's all connected and it all depends in the one's desire. So we have unplanned, and each one have his interest. This is what create crisis in planning. This is what I'm calling the harmful for quality of life. There is no quality of life. There is no accessibility, no initial services inside of this residential area.
And can we add that in the comparison to the Jewish communities, there's a requirement for 40% of all planned communities to go for public space, whether that's facilities or parks or sidewalks. And as Anaya is talking about, if you only plan per individual housing unit, all that space gets taken away. So the implications here are space for schools, space for police stations, space for
Daycare
parks, daycare centers. Anytime you try to create a public good, there's an issue of being able to find land. That doesn't even touch on the state versus private land issue.
So with all of this unsafe construction, has there been real?
Unsafe.
Some of it's unsafe.
Some of it
Some of it may be unsafe,
Well,
but it's not.
okay, so, well, let's say some of it with the electricity, you were saying it's not safe, it's dangerous. So I guess my question is, without any inspections and the typical things that go with building that I'm familiar with in this country to ensure safety, have there been incidents where there's been either lack of fire or collapse of a structure, or things that kind of would cause a wake-up call to the community because they saw the results of the safety issue? I know there's lots of other issues that make the quality of life poor, but is there some situation where there was a fire truck couldn't get in? Are there a lot of situations like that happening, or is it not too much?
Yeah, you know, living in Wadi Ara or spending most of my day in Wadi Ara, I know that this happens. Before I asked why didn't people just protest, it's something very unusual. It happens, but it happens in the micro scale, and no one talked about it. Like you, I have these incidents when people come and told me, yesterday my father needed an ambulance, but the ambulance couldn't get in. So his situation is very difficult in the hospital until we get in our private cars to the hospitals in order to take care of him. So this situation, fire, I didn't hear about a very big fire that happened, but actually the last, it's in the sides. It's the fires of the forest beside, but it's another issue that forest goes inside the development area. Or besides, it's very close, so there was fires, but it's beside, so it was something to take care about. But inside there is incidents like that, but it's not something that make people understand that they are doing, that it's wrong what's happening, but they don't have any other solutions to give. So this is the housing or the homes that they want or need in their.
So if I can just interject and say, it seems like the crisis that you're describing is one where there's obviously a problem in terms of basic needs and quality of life, but the access to solutions, which would be from government planning and budgets and better planning, has a roadblock because of the criminal framing, the illegal, the fact that in order to seek solutions, you have to present yourself as breaking the law.
Yeah, but actually what happened now, I will just explain about 922 or 120 days team recommendation. It's that they have this problem. This problem and in data, it's more data, more housing, more homes, more illegal housing that's happening, more poor areas. It was presented to them. So it was the 120 days DiEM recommendation, and I think it's shifting paradigm regarding many of the thoughts about illegal. I'll just explain main points. And it was the establishment or the government resolution of 922, which I'll start from what has been the focus for the last 4 years into 922. It's giving money. It's money for 15 municipalities, it's called the strategical agreements with the biggest 15 Arab municipalities, giving them money for detailed and master plans, and less money for more 43. It's okay, it's giving money for master and detailed plan. It's giving money for public buildings and public spaces, which is, I cannot build a public building without having a plan or an area which is allocated as a public in a plan, as a public zone, and more. They get money also to empowerment of local authorities. This is the money. This is something that when I started working in the local planning committee, it was a decision to keep or to allocate the money to the local authorities. I won't get in, but if there is conditions to keep the money, of course, it's more complicated. It was written. This is the numbers were written in the GR, in the government resolution, but not all of it was given, or it was conditioned how to give it to the local municipalities. But I think the most important thing that was done, the shifting that was, it's not only the money, because the money we have in the year 2000, there was other governmental decision to give money to master plans in the Arab society. And after 10 years, we evaluated that. It was talking about only money, and the effect was really, we didn't see the achievement of the effect of this money. But actually what happened here, and it's very unique to what happened in 2015, is the change in the shifting paradigm in thinking about major subjects and major problems inside of the planning processes. So from illegal building to legalization, they said, okay, we're talking about illegal, it's criminals by the law, but we know when we investigated that they built because there is the lack of planning for many years. So we are not dealing with them only by the law, or not dealing them by the law for the next 2-3 years. We understand that it is a crisis, it's a phenomenon and a symptom of crisis, and we want to deal with it. And to deal with it, it's more having more master plans and detailed plans to legalize the illegal planning of the things.
So you mean it's the shift in government thinking?
Yeah.
About Arab society,
Yeah.
about how they perceive the situation?
Yeah, exactly, and it's what it was written in the recommendation of 120 days. So about the private plan.
Just as a note, the shifting, well, this is under the rubric of 922.
Yeah, right.
In existing mixed towns in Israel, where there is also a significant amount of illegal building in the Arab sections of those towns, there has also been movement towards legalizing the housing that was off the grid. It's not, I don't think it's being done as systematically as 922, but the information I have from Lod, for example, is that there has been some significant progress.
Yeah, in 922, they didn't talk about the mixed cities, and they didn't do about the unrecognized villages in the Negev. So there is issues that wasn't dealt by 120 recommendation or by 922. So there, I think the processes are more inside, and it depends on the policy inside of Lud, Ramle, Yafa, or the mixed cities. But here, if we talk nationally, it was written that we are talking about illegal buildings. From illegal buildings and criminals, we are shifting to this paradigm of legalization, of the need to legalize, and it's very important because it's a planning institution. All the time that they had a plan, that we applied a plan to legalize building, the answer we get, we have this order from the legal consultant of the government that we are not allowed to permit this legalization. And now it's very important shifting that we can apply, like the plan I applied, it's in Al-Fahm, we can apply a plan with 3,500 illegal buildings and say our main goal is to legalize it. It's something that we couldn't use in our...
So we had a meeting in Washington in September with a fellow, correct me, those who were there, Iran Nitzan, who was, I think, the head of the entire land authority for Israel, the National Planning Committee, or chair.
He was in the finance ministry.
No,
he wasn't.
Well, he was, his former position was the head of the National Planning Committee. Now he's not an ambassador.
He's the economic mission consul in DC, and he was part of the 120 Days Committee, and you know him. You know Eran Nitzan?
Yeah,
So
from there I know him, but I didn't...
Yeah, so in our discussion with him, he mentioned that we discussed this process of legalization, and he explained that he thinks a great number, a large percentage of the homes could be legalized, but there would be a percentage of the homes that could not be legalized for various reasons, and they would have to be demolished. What is your view on that? What is your understanding about that? And is it, maybe you could give us the bigger picture on that, and also maybe
Can I
a smaller
answer
picture?
your question in just to
Of course.
delay it, yeah? Okay, because it's very important and it's connected to planning tools, the development of planning tools when we talk about legalization. Because when we talk about legalization, the main assume we have is that these buildings are existing because of lack of planning. He built his home because he needed home, and he didn't know that this will be very initial for any public use.
Right.
It's not the concept.
Right.
So our main start point is that we are talking about legalization. But you are right. There was many areas that if you don't move,
Right.
I don't want to use the word
Relocate.
the home or the home and give another or alternative opportunity, money compensation, it's not
Land.
we are talking about land compensation. If you don't get this alternative for the people, you won't get any acceptance, and you cannot implement this plan. And this is connected to the planning tools that actually I can say it's something that is missing and must be developed now inside
So
the
is it
airports.
your opinion that is it your opinion that the homes that, let's say, the government says will have to be demolished, using their language, do you feel that most of those homes can be relocated and you can basically solve these problems?
I think it's
Through planning?
Yeah,
It's solvable.
It's not detailed plans, it's not the job of detailed plan of this approach. I think it's other approach when you're talking about urban regeneration or urban renewal inside of specific areas, because you can't do it for the whole.
It's case by case.
It's case by case, and we need the tools. Till now, we don't have the tools, and I think it's not that only the Arabs don't have the tool, it's in Israel, this tool is not existing, but it's very initial and very important to develop such tools inside of the Arab towns because of this situation, because we have legalization, we have lack of planning, and now we need the public services, we need the open spaces. How do we get them inside of the existing residential area? Okay. The first one is the main titles. I'll give the titles. It's from illegal to the need to legalize. It's from this idea or answer that we got all the time that 90% of the land, of the jurisdiction areas of the Arab towns are private owned, so they will solve their problems. To know, it's not solving the problem. It can't solve the problem. The problem, there is a lack of public buildings, public space, open spaces, services, main services, economic development for the local municipality, and that's why they talk about expanding the jurisdiction area or the boundaries of the municipality and having more state land, because state land, it could be given or could be allocated to public buildings, public uses, but not only, it's also housing for people that do not own land, and it's about 60-70% of the Arab population. Of course, lack of planning, they will have their own plans to the concept that we will plan, from poor to more empowerment of the local authorities, and from very slow bureaucratic stages of planning to speed it or to make it faster in many tracks. Yes, please.
I'm just curious, at the municipal level, what's your sense of the local municipalities' priority in this land expansion for housing versus economic development, industrial activity? Because there's just an inherent problem that you get more property tax from commercial than you do from housing. And so are you seeing pushback on the housing side? How's that playing out on the ground?
It's more property tax not from housing. It's more, they understand that it's more property tax from other uses
Right.
like commercial, yeah.
Right, so they'd
And-
rather do that.
Yeah,
than-
and this is one of the things that we, in each plan, when we have this expansion, it's how do we, how do you decide what the percentage for homes, because the ones that do not own lands inside, they need these homes actually, and the economic development and what they can get or allocate for industrial, or which is the economic development or the financial situation of the towns. Actually, in each plan we have this discussion. When you get state land, when you have this expansion, it's more easier to deal with this problem and to allocate for these two main needs. And I can say that I just followed many of the plans. In the last year, we have more awareness of the local municipality regarding this need to allocate for area that they can get the tax and more developed, economically developed inside of their jurisdiction area. Okay, what I talked about is money, 922 money, and changing in policy processes. And this is what I had when I get into the local committee, and this is what I use. That's the micro or the case study of Fahem, and how using the two tools, we have two main tools together, how we really achieve a plan with legalization of 3,500 homes, the expansion of the land, and having more state land for public uses. It's about third. This third, it was expansion. We didn't have it. If we were, if we took the development area that was approved before by the district planning committee, we wouldn't have the state land. So it's the expansion that we have, and the expansion was 700, 800 dunams. The dunams, 4 dunams, it's 1 acre. It's for the transition.
I
Yeah.
have a question about expansion of land. That land is provided by the state. Another thing we heard at this meeting, if correct me anybody if I'm wrong, is that when the state provides extra land to an Arab municipality, there is some dispute about whether that land can be used exclusively for Arab citizens of Israel or Arab residents of that town, because it would be discriminatory if it was just for Arabs.
Just for Arabs or just for the local citizens?
Or
of
just
this-
for the local
Yeah.
citizens.
This is
So
a discussion
therefore-
we have, yeah.
How are you resolving that in this case study?
Actually, this will be more how we say accurate discussion when we talk about marketing. In this stage, we are talking about planning. So
Okay,
it's planned,
that's correct.
Yeah. So it's planned for it's planned for public services, commercial,
Yeah, right.
and a little part of it for homes. And actually, we have this question. We have it in Arara, which is already in the stage. It's more advanced stage.
Right.
The argument is that from the local municipality's view, we had a lack in marketing lands, and we have so much people inside of our local municipality that didn't have the opportunity to buy, to access to these homes. And actually, if you open it to the market,
Right.
it could be something that the market can raise the prices,
Right.
can bring people from other for investments, not for
That's
homes. And this is very difficult argument. What's standing till now, it's percentage, and it depends on the population of the local municipality. Whether you have more than 20,000 citizens inside of your town, then 25% must be for outsiders. And the other, so this is like a math. They did a function.
A proportion or some.
A proportion.
Yeah.
But actually, the argument there, it's very convincing from the local municipality. I know that it's very dangerous to use a tool in a very vast way, because it's somehow discriminatory. Not only for Arabs, not only for Jews, it's also for Arabs, because we are talking about local. We
Right.
are talking about locals from the same
Right.
town itself.
Okay, so you're
everybody follow
negotiating something to solve that
Yeah.
issue too?
And it also depends on the case itself.
Okay.
I think each
Thank you.
case is discussed in
Okay.
different way, because
Okay.
there is places that there was marketing of lands inside of it.
I think
some
this is
less.
so complicated. I just want to quickly bring it down to
Okay.
I want to just say, so basically, there's a housing crisis in Arab society. There's also a very different cultural, because of the lack of planning and because of the cultural proclivity for Arabs to stay in their own towns, they've become overcrowded and you need new housing. Once you develop new housing, Israel is a democratic place. You can't build housing just for one type of people. It's just like we don't want to say, there's a lot of controversy about whether Jewish towns can have acceptance committees about who can live there. You can't create acceptance committees in Arab towns legally that only allow for Arabs to live in that town. However, there's this crisis in which if you build new housing, a new housing development, which hasn't happened in most Arab towns ever, suddenly you have all these units available. What happens if the market comes in and says, oh, wonderful, there's housing, there's cheap housing available. Either Jewish people will come in to take advantage of the economic opportunity, or people will make it an investment and raise prices. It creates a market problem. But can you solve it by saying preferential treatment for local families who maybe want to live with their in-laws? So she's what Naya's saying is that there's some fine tuning in terms of trying to respect the fairness, the market system, as well as the local unique needs of Arab society. And it's part of an example of just how complicated planning and housing crisis that is accumulated over time, how complicated the solutions are and how every element
Just
requires.
to add to that for a second and then to move on, this thing of preference for local residents has a lot of precedence in Israel. On the Moshavim, the farming communities, there's an allocation of land just for local residents. It's happening now in all kinds of other developments, so it's not being used just in Arab towns.
Yeah, and
It's
they-
controversial everywhere.
And
Sometimes it's not controversial.
They're like 10 lawsuits here right now.
And the acceptance, you talked about the acceptance committees, it's not, okay, so this is what it's using, like it's all of these, and you can see the person, that all of this is changing in the policy change that I used from what's written in the 120 days recommendation, and regarding the money, and actually 92 get money from the Fahem, gave them about 22 millions. It's divided to stages, they didn't get all the money, but for this plan, for this area, they didn't give them money. It's allocated by the government and it's not flexible. So when I go there, I needed money, I have no money. It's a poor local municipality, we don't have money to allocate and to issue the plan. We went to the governmental institution and we got extra 8 million shekels, but it's not alone. I just was the one that called every representative from each one and one. Yeah, I called myself as a nudnik, even all the time. But it's bringing all of them together, because without that, bringing all of them together with a mutual interest, all of them have their problematic and barriers inside of any of the governmental ministries. Like the Minister of Justice is legalization of criminals. It's not easy for them. And using the fast way, the Batmal, in order to legalize criminals, it wasn't an easy, it had to be an extraordinary guidance from the legal consultant of the government regarding these areas. And it was written regarding Fahem, and we had a plan together. It was communicating them, explaining it's your mutual interest, how we can solve it. You cannot demolish 3,000 homes. You have to legalize it, you have to give them the minimum or the initial services. So all of these were representative from each one of these was the connection, and they were partners in accomplishing or in this achievement.
Here's just a quick process question. Was ACAP playing the role of consultant to the municipality? Were they tasked with doing all this work? How did it work? Like who did all of this work for with the municipality?
I was the chief planner of the local urban planning of the area. Of course, the organization, and it's a very good question regarding the role of the organization, the civil society, inside of the implementation of many plans. It's not only these plans, but it's accompanying many of the local municipalities, and they have their role.
So just to be clear, and I was a government official as a district planner, and was, but one for the district, so you had connections to the local, and you also had access to all the government bodies. And as a professional planner, not only an engineer and a woman planner at that, I think, and an Arab planner with familiarity with both sides, you're a unique quantity in this planning pipeline between the needs in Arab society and the government awareness and how to implement all the policy changes that are theoretically available, but without somebody like you knocking on the doors,
nothing would happen. It wasn't done, but it's very important also. Maybe you have been in the beginning. I worked in ACAP for 12 years before I have been in this governmental job, and for the last 4 years I worked through local planning institution with specific issues. So all the time, ACAP for me is a home who I grew up inside of it. I worked all the time with the staff there. So the role of ACAP and other organizations, there's other organizations that have the role inside the implementation of 922. It was very, very important role in this plan and in other plans. Okay. Yes.
Can I ask you a question about how you're partnering with the community? So you're talking about a lot of official type of people, but is there a way that you're partnering? Because I think there would be a lot of distrust and people that are gaining a lot from the system that's already happening.
Yeah.
And it's like to break
the
down.
The matter of distrust, I think it's the main word that we have in planning. Yeah, the lack of distrust between distrust between the Arabs and the planning institutions. But actually, I think this is the word, the mutual interest. If we are talking about successes and plans that make change and make improvement of the situation, it's very important to engage. And from the other side, I want to say something. I am in governmental position, but I'm from the community. They know me. They know me before as my work in the Arab Center for Alternative Planning. We are engaged through the local municipalities, through the mayors. They know the professionality and they know the ability to help inside of this professionality, but beside of that, it's the commitment to the local community. And in this, by the way, inside of this tivuch or inside of these connections with the local community, the civil society as ACAP played a very significant role in bringing also and explaining and having more trust between the sides. Actually, I want to say something. This is an example of achievement, which is very important, using what has done or has written by the government by 120 days team recommendation and GR 92. But actually, if you go to the macro stage and if you have the data, even from the ministries, the Ministry of Construction and the housing minister of, if you have the data, you can see that not all the money, I'm talking now about the money, not all the money has been transferred to the local municipalities. We're talking about less than 30% for planning, less than 10% for public housing,
public buildings,
and it's all connected in not be able to implement the policy change. The policy change, if it was more getting exposed to the officials, to the professionals, and to the decision makers inside of the planning institution, of the governmental institution, it would be easier to implement. And of course, the implementation of a policy, it's connected directly to the implementation or transferring the money and getting the plans approved. Okay, I'm going back to your question.
Can I just clarify that last point? So of 922 funding that was allocated to planning, you're saying that only 30% has been allocated, and you're saying that it's the ability of the government institutions themselves to implement
Yeah, I think.
that is the main barrier, not the weakness of the
I think
municipality?
it's the two
Yeah,
sides. It plays from the two sides.
mismatch and it's
Yeah.
a
Okay.
Because when we have these achievements, it's not only,
Right,
it's professionality from down top
right,
and requesting and knowing the rights,
Right.
and knowing what's the governmental policy. And from the other side, it's more exposing, already educational process for the professionals and decision makers inside of the planning institution.
I'm wondering why they can't use that Vatmal fast track to fast track the huge numbers of illegal housing to make it legal.
Yeah, you know, we are applying in new Vatmal in Arara. And we sent in Arara.
Okay.
I don't know if you met, Alan told me about Mudar. Mudar is,
Yeah.
Mudar is someone that I worked with. He's also the head of the forum of the mayors of the Arab mayors.
Yeah.
So we applied for a new Vatmal in Arara.
Okay.
Vatmal is a special government planning track that was established after the 2011, sort of, its precursor was established after the 2011 social justice protests to allow for, to work around all the bureaucracies for developing major housing development. It was not applied to Arab society until after 120 Days Committee and after 922. But it allows for, now there's about, what, a dozen projects through the, there's a handful of projects that are now in the Vatmal for Arab society, and it's a tool that allows for, it's one of those platforms that allows to overstep some of these barriers.
Yeah.
So in shorthand, it's a fast-track planning process.
But is it also fair to say, I mean, the amount of 922 money in housing and planning is, I mean, hugely lower than anywhere else in terms of allocation. But isn't it also fair to say that the housing programs that have been developed at the national level are not a very good fit for land use, tenure, kind of cultural financing situations of people living in Arab towns. So there's a huge problem on the deliveries, the financing delivery side too.
If I can jump in, I think maybe this is where you can, I think the connection of Vatmal with 120 days policy change is one of those examples where if there are people in the central government, the locals that can connect and say, we have these policy tools, we have these tracks, and can design a plan that uses both, then it might be effective. But that you don't have all those elements because you need to do it case by case because the situation is so unique for every Arab community.
Yeah, and in explanation to that, and in answering the question, that's why I'm thinking that this micro study case, and we have one also in Arara, we need to make it in other places. We needed to take it to the macro level also, and to work nationally. This is what the regional platform, maybe.
Is that a cluster? Regional platform meaning cluster?
Yeah, it's what we need to be done.
But aren't all
not working with that.
No, not working. But I think this is what happened in the micro scale and in the case study, and this is what has to be done in the macro and in other places inside of the Arab country.
So following up on on the point that you just made earlier about only 30% of the funds being allocated out of those that were authorized, is there any issue of losing allocation or losing the funds because they were not applied in a particular period of time?
Actually, the sentence that I started with, that now is very, very important. It is the important day, the important
Almost at the end.
to, it's almost at the end, till the end of 2020. If it's not implemented, no money. And yesterday I just read that there is many sides that try to convince the government.
Authorized but not allocated.
No, authorized not allocated to extend the
period of time.
the period to implement it. It actually, there is many organization, ACAP, Sikui, and many organizations are working in that. The joint list yesterday had a meeting with the finance people in order to get this extension. It's very urgent. Without that, we have allocation, it's very important. We have to do two things. It's the extension of this, of the implementation of these decisions, and to implement it. Implementation, I mean not only having the money, allocating the money, but also the change in the policy. Change in the policy. That's why I think it's a very good tool. What happened in the case study or the micro case study is bringing people together. And this is some kind of a platform for people, maybe a regional platform that can bring people together and planning. I usually use it. It's an art. It's not a science. So we don't have answers. It's not 1 + 1. It's 2. It's ad hoc. It's coalitions. It's whether you are in the process of taking decisions or not. And I think a platform of bringing all the people together in specific issues, specific time, specific data, it will bring the change and the achievement got. And from the other side, I'm taking your comment. Actually, yes, there is a gap between the planning. We're talking now till now, then this is the thing that I think I didn't succeed. I didn't succeed to do because we need to invest more tools and thinking in this side. There is a gap between planning procedure and planning characteristics and tools between what happens in the whole of the country and the real situation in the Arab townships. And we have to create a new tools. And this is creation of the new tools to deal with the problem of housing and open spaces and private ownership and reallocation of land, re-registration of land. This must be something that we must invest our time to make these tools and to create these tools in order to be implemented. And this is the most important, I think, in parallel to what happens in GR 922 and in the implementation of these decisions, it must be accompanied with this creation of knowledge and tools to be implemented inside of the plans. Otherwise, we'll have a crisis. We'll have numbers of housing.
We won't be able to finance them. I mean, that's.
Can't finance. So about
no economic development and no,
this parallel, this gap of new planning tools to address these kind of antiquated or one-size-fits-all planning procedures that really don't fit. Who is going to develop? I know you are thinking about all this, but is there going to be some major push to develop a really sophisticated planning policy paper around this type of thing? Is this ACAP is taking this on, or who is taking it on?
I believe yes. We can do it in a cup. I think it's one of the things, one of the questions, what's your movement from a planning institution, local planning institution, to a more national? I think it's not only one organization, it must be cooperation. Cooperation, it's the professional and knowledge of the local elements, the local characteristics from one side, and from the other side is cooperation with knowledge centers with academic people, with the mayors, with the decision makers from the government and outside of the government.
Is that initiative underway, or it needs to get underway?
It needs to get, it's one of the things that I believe that must be done in the next.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Period.
The role of ACAP is very clear of value. To what extent can you extend the tools that you're developing, the micro plans, to application in the area of Arab sections in Jerusalem?
Okay.
Which are, by Israeli law, part of the municipality of Jerusalem, but need also significant development efforts. Where of course there's also a national conflict which is not being resolved.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, issues of development have to be addressed, and given the political structure right now, it can only be addressed under Israeli law or under Israeli constraints. Can you get yourselves involved in helping to develop, to plan the development of Arab neighborhoods in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I will start to answer your question in more describing what happened in the platform in East Jerusalem. Actually, there is a fund. We can argue regarding the most conflictual situation in the whole world, I think. It's what's happening here in Jerusalem. It's very conflictual and it's very, I don't want to talk about the context, but we have this cooperation, we have the academic institution, the urban clinic, who initiated a platform bringing all the people together and creating knowledge. It was about creating knowledge and about meeting people to know each other, to know the projects of each other, and to share the knowledge and to create. It's sharing what each side have, discussing. It's about the mutual interest of each one that's beside or in the table in that time, and creating knowledge regarding planning tools that make or develop or upgrade the quality of life or making quality of life in this situation inside of residential area. I'm taking that to what I spoke about. It's the need to create tools and the need to get this or use this platform and a cooperation between organizations such ACAP and the urban clinic with so much knowledge, and it's the source of the knowledge and the connection to academia, and connecting it to the locals, the organization that have the local knowledge. It's the way how we can create, and maybe it's a position paper, it's a policy paper, I don't know, but it's creating the tools, creating the knowledge, everything together.
If I can
Yeah,
add
I think you
on
should
to that a
jump
little
in
bit,
a little
sure.
bit.
Someone is the only person in the meeting. I think back and forth here, what Anaya's proposing to do for the next stage of 922 and to move it forward links in, thanks for the question about Jerusalem, links into what we've been doing there, expands it and deepens it. So if I stay on this one, we spent the last year building exactly what you said, a platform of bringing together the local representatives and the government representatives. Because it can't be just, I'm on your question, Josh, it can't be just strengthening the local authorities. When they come to argue their case, the government people have to understand.
Right.
And the best way for them to understand that, or at least one of the strongest ways, is by meeting together, not over a specific case where they're arguing about who's going to win, meeting together neutrally, where they're learning together and they're thinking it through on case study examples. So that's one. And I think that kind of a platform, if you can take what Anaya did in Al-Fahim and bring it up to the Arabe Sakhnin area and say, what would this mean over here? And you've got the people in the room with their own plans looking at that. That's one piece. The creating new planning knowledge and tools, Julie, you're absolutely right. We can't just do, this is the way it's worked in Israeli Jewish society on 92% public lab. It's got to be different translations and adaptations. It's not all new. It's new for us. They're doing some of this stuff in Jordan. They're doing some of this stuff in places in Egypt. They're doing some of it in Morocco. There's where to learn from if we want to say some of this is about Arab culture. So let's learn that. Let's bring that in. This is part of what the role of a university is, to be able to say, we're not inventing a wheel. Let's learn from our colleagues who are doing this seriously. And a lot of these things need to be reinvented. What is public space? What does it mean? How do we do that? Demonstrating small wins, super important. Some of you, I think, have been walking with us around very, very small things in East Jerusalem where we say, look at this public space stuff. Look, we did this little teeny corner. Look, we did this little teeny wall. You know, and you go, oh my God, what is this little teeny? Well, this little teeny is what lets those residents increase trust in the next stage. When we say there's going to be a road coming through here, there's going to be a community center. Oh, you know what? We said there was going to be a painting and there is a painting. We said there was going to be a nicer garden and there is a nicer garden. Let's move forward. We're finding that when we can make small wins, that people are engaged in shaping the space around them, it's much, much easier to get through a change in awareness in the planning processes. So you asked, what's the responsibility of local people to know that they want public spaces? Show them why they want them. Make a couple. And then it's easier to move forward with that. Oh, the government is really going to make new schools. We saw it. Okay, let's get more allocate space for that. And then the last one, I think, is what Anaya just keeps stressing and stressing and stressing moving forward. If the tools that are used are just the Israeli government tools, maybe there will be thousands of new homes created or housing units in the government term. Will those be good places to live? Will those be good neighborhoods? Will those be good places to bring up your kids? And I think what I'm learning from you, Anaya, is that there's a great fear that the answer is no. We can't just do quantity. We've got to start looking at quality, and that's a whole new shaping of the way forward. And that's, by the way, also in a lot of the Jewish planning.
Yeah, I'm curious, are there any lessons of this, of what you're talking about, in Israeli society as a whole? So can the government learn anything for developing housing in Jewish society or in the Jewish communities from what you're doing in Arab
40
communities?
years ago?
I think it's a great question, Ellen. I think that this platform approach is something that can be learned. I don't, as someone who sits in academia and is surrounded by people who write reports, I don't believe in writing reports. I think you write the report, I'm looking at you, Julie, you write the report and the report goes over the shoulder and nobody pays attention. But like what you described with the 120 Days Committee, when you've got the civil society and the private sector and the academia and the government people in the room together, and they're creating together what should happen, then things have a bigger chance.
Right, because affordable housing is by no means solved in Israel as a whole, right? I mean, it's a pervasive problem.
Right.
There are different roots and it played out differently.
Emily, I've heard you say on many occasions, part of the issue, and this goes across everyone in the country, is it's a country, a capitalist country on steroids with this neurotic Soviet Union system of planning and better than I've ever said. But a Soviet system, centralized planning and whatever minuscule housing financing and infrastructure there is, which is extremely underdeveloped, is an exceedingly top-down thing. And here's where I think you said this to me a number of years ago. Part of this has to be a recognition of flexibility and some levels of local authority and some levels of local agency. And that's a challenge because not all municipalities have the technical capacity and there's fear of misplacement of money and blah, 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 blah. But, bottom up and top-down meeting, but there has got to be, and maybe the next government will do this, some level of flexibility and the rigidity of this process. And Batmal's a good sign, the kind of flexibility on considering legalizing housing, those are all very positive signs. But that's got to be part of this thinking about planning, is somehow the Soviet regime's got to be busted up. It just doesn't make sense in how the rest of the country functions.
He's the next prime minister.
Yeah, but the ones coming up are learning from them.
Julie, I think the good news is that is starting to sink in. I think what we talk about a lot is middle out, not so much the top down and the bottom up, it's the middle out. It's those people who are the professionals, it's Anayas.
Right.
And there need to be more Anayas, there need to be a lot more Anayas. Right. But it's those people who, exactly what she described, sit in the middle, and she can go to the mayor, and she can go to the finance ministry, and she can also go down to the local planner.
So how are
and local
25
people.
of you cultivated? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a massive capacity problem, and how would you recommend building that professional capacity?
This is, I think I've been for the last 4 years learning a lot. I learned a lot from the position of chief planner in the planning, in the local planning committee, which is statutory, it's by the law. But from the other side, it's the commitment and the engagement to the public and the community. It's very important in order to achieve this change. I think this experience I can, and this is what I explained, it's part of taking this experience, and the main goal is to take it and to make copies of it or working with the professionals. Now we have, it's me, and also, of course, it's ACAP that have all the connection with the local municipalities, and it's an address, it's a professional address. We can add all of this experience of what happened, and it's happened. It's happened for 4 years. It's very important what's happened, but we must upgrade it. If we take the momentum of what is really done, what the wins for the affordable housing, we have a very good example of what happened about rental housing inside of one of the townships. That happened when professionals, when from the civil society was intervene or the procedure, and without that it couldn't happen. So the two things together, working and knowing what happened at the local municipalities, the professionals in the local municipalities, how we can empower them. I have so many things that I learned. There is a program of Tsarim, it's professionals that came into to the local municipalities, which is very great. But I think but it wasn't really used in this area of planning system, and didn't really use to upgrade the situation in the Arab society. And I think it's one of the things I
took a couple of cadets.
Yeah, I took one, and it was fantastic working together. But the Jewish one, yeah.
Right.
But he couldn't do the work without a mentor, and without a mentor that knows what's happening, because many of these, how do you call them? Cadets. Yeah, they integrated in Arabs, but they don't know what's their mission. They have powerful knowledge, but they don't know how to invest it in order to make a change. So we're talking about mentors, we're talking about working with the professional, it's outreaching, engagement with the professional groups inside of the local municipalities, inside of the local committees, inside of the district, and inside of the community itself, with all the plans that is being invested. It's lots of money for these people to be professional and to go in and to make a change, but they can know all the things and have the tools. They know, they came in with lots of knowledge, big amount of knowledge, but when they go in, if they don't have a mentor, they don't have direction, if they don't have really know the background and what's going on and what their tools are, they cannot make the change. And this is what happens. For example, it's one of the housing
issues at all.
It's okay. Knowledge is easy to give. Knowledge is really easy. You just learn. What's harder is commitment, fortitude, resiliency, and flexibility. And I think what I see teaching planning now for, I guess, over 10 years, or maybe 12, I see a change in our students. I see our students being more and more interested in this kind of work. I see them more and more approaching urban planning as a tool for creating social change, for making their worlds better. I'm flooded with students like that now. They want work experience, like you're saying. They desperately need the mentoring. I'm tempted to ask you, and I don't know if you want to answer it here, what kinds of stresses you yourself faced, what kinds of pressures you faced working on the 120 Days Committee, collaborating with government and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
People, young leaders going through that, they need support. They need people who can say, it's okay, you'll get through it. Here's, or that's tough, that's really hard. You're trailblazing. And the fact that you're mentoring now is just amazing.
How many people in the program, a little sales pitch here, could you just describe how many people are in the program, how it is expanded, what the number of applicants are, percentage of Arabs in the program?
I will say this generally over Israel. Israel, I think I said this a couple of years ago, we have one of the highest percentages of planners per population in the world. Next to the UK, I think we're the second highest from what I've seen. Singapore may be higher. Planning is really central, it's really important. We have tons of people. There are 3 schools that confer a planning degree, the Technion, Hebrew University, Ben Gurion, and Tel Aviv to a degree. I'm a little bit skeptical about that one, but no, that doesn't need to get out. Sometimes it's through architecture, sometimes it's through geography, sometimes it's linked to public policy. At Hebrew U, we have 160 students over a 2-year cohort. It's a 2-year program. It's studying 2 days a week. Most people condense it into one. So that means all the graduate students are pretty much full-time working while they have kids, while they're studying. And the opportunity for real life experience, doing hands-on things, getting mentored professionally and academic is absolutely critical. Because otherwise, 160 is a lot. We're a small faculty, there's a lot of
Arab
adjuncts.
students does that make up?
Very small. When I started, there was one. Now, due to scholarships, we have 9 continuing this year. Most of those are from East Jerusalem because we're based in Jerusalem, which is 40% Arab, and so we need to have that. And I don't have those comparable figures for the Technion or Ben Gurion, but they would be important ways to check that, and there are ways that we're collaborating across the universities to do this as a common mission. Haifa also has a geography program that do they get a plan? I don't think so. They have a strong geography program. You may have met Rasim Khamaisi there as well. Something else I was going to say there? Yeah, if they don't get the kind of mentoring that Anaya is saying while they're studying, then they get thrown out from sitting in the ivory town into the real world, and they get told, "Oh, everything you're talking about doesn't really work. It doesn't happen like that." Just let me finish this last one, just because I've known you for a long time now. I think, and I've never said this to you, I never heard it as clearly as hearing you talk now. I think some of Anaya's fortitude and resilience and persistence in that job in Wadi Ara was because of 12 years working with a nonprofit.
Yeah, of course.
12 years of working in a social change organization equips her to know, no, you just keep trying, you go this way, you find another partner. I think that's super important, is this moving in between civil society and public sector and private sector.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think it was the first time that someone passed from civil society to a governmental job. It was said by officially, because somehow they really pick or choose people from the private sector or someone that have been in governmental position. But now, in this case, it was the first time that it was, and I think this is the change. This is how you get it, and how you, actually, I learned from it, I gave, and it was too reachy, very reachy period. Also for the civil society, as someone that came from the civil society and coming back, or going back to the civil society to macro scale and to make achievements happen. And for the local planning committee itself, when defining the role of planner as different, because each one, I just explained to Leron, if you want to be a planner in the local committee, you have to be an engineer which is registered. So many people, there is very few planners that have this, that have engineer registered. So when there is a position for local planning committees and a planner, they usually get engineer with no knowledge about planning and about processes. And this is one of the things, I think it must be more awareness regarding the importance to integrate these two jobs together.
I just want to say it's 10:15. I feel like the focus is on, there's a good vibe in the room. Whoever needs to go, please go. But we have the room if you want to continue discussion.
Not to ask the really nasty question, given the fact that there's no government, and I don't know that it looks like there's gonna be a government, what are the chances of extending 922? I mean, is there, can that be done within the framework of no government? Assuming that.
Well, firstly, that's a while away, because 922 runs through December of next year.
December
of next year.
Of
2020.
Right.
Secondly, I believe there was just a piece in yesterday's Times talking about, well, there's no government at the top, government continues working very well. And in the case of 922, and here, maybe, please tell me if I'm wrong, because I hadn't, I get the impression that 922 is deeply embedded in many of the ministries, that the Ministry of Finance in particular has been the champion of 922, and they continue to do so. And best of all, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, the organized Arab community in the form of the Joint List and the Association of Arab Mayors continues to be supportive of 922 as it is moving towards its replenishment or reauthorization.
Yeah, definitely. They are now in these days. This is what I said. That yesterday there was a meeting with the Minister of Finance with the Joint List. They are already talking about extending and talking about framing specific articles inside of the government resolution itself. So this is something that is all of the parties, which is the Arabs from the Arab community, Joint List, are trying to do with the ministries. From the other side, it's one of the talks. I usually talk with, I have talks with many mayors, Mudar, one of them, so he's the head of the Association of the Mayors, and they know that there is many things that have to be changed in 922 with the money, the allocation of the money, and the content itself. So it's something that we want to work in details. And there is, I may say, the governmental officials, they are open to that. They want this knowledge because they understand that sitting in Jerusalem, where we are planning for the Arabs, most of them in the periphery, doesn't help them without getting this local knowledge from the real people inside of these communities. So it's very open, it's a momentum, this is what I said. It's very important to extend, to have changes, but it's very important to implement in a overhaul or a strategical review for the whole system.
Thank you. Thank you, Anaya, and cloning you might happen faster. Cloning you might happen faster.
Oh, thank you very much. What is better than
and we're part of the task force, so and I'm literally going to Haifa next week. I was looking up where this town is and I see it's super close. Yeah? What about you? Oh! Okay. Oh, very cool. Okay, so we're like counterparts. Remind me of your name. Maura. Okay, so nice to meet you. Melissa. Who's the lady with APAC. Oh my God. It is? How are you?
Jenna knows.
How are you, Michelle? I'm good. How are you? Nobody else waits. I'm there, but whatever it was, in my living room, it was like a piece, like my first
Standing together. This is standing together.
No, tomorrow is so without a mere purport.
I remember me from Vancouver. I worked there a long time ago. When I see you, I think of Wadi out here. I'm good. So now, I left Vancouver for APAC, and I missed the university. So I left APAC because I missed the university space. So now I'm at the University of Haifa. And I'm literally going to Haifa next week, so I was looking up a bit. No, see how close I am to Haifa. So yeah, it's exciting because what we're looking to do in Haifa